Somebody in this room needs to hear this right now, in the middle of what you can't tell nobody about, in the middle of the storm you smile through, in the middle of the battles you fight behind closed doors. God told me to tell you, you are not alone. You may feel surrounded, but you're not abandoned. You may feel outnumbered, but you're not overpowered. Because while you're fighting what's visible, God is fighting what's invisible. While you're wrestling with the seen, heaven is handling the unseen. Oh, if you only knew the battles God has already won before you even woke up this morning, you would lift your hands, open your mouth, and shout, I am not alone. God is fighting my hidden battles. There are moments in life when you feel like you're standing on the stage of your own existence, lights dim, curtains drawn, and no audience in sight. You carry burdens in your heart that no one claps for, no one sees, and no one understands. You fight battles in your mind that you don't have the vocabulary to express. You smile in public but tremble in private. You encourage others while quietly falling apart yourself. And if anyone were to look at you from the outside, they'd see composure, strength, determination, but what they don't see is the invisible war raging behind your eyes. They don't see the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the anxiety, the quiet prayers whispered into the darkness. They don't see the moments where you feel overwhelmed, under-equipped, and unseen. But here is the truth that heaven whispers into the weary heart. God is working behind the scenes in battles you don't even know you're fighting. There are storms you never had to stand in because God rerouted them. There are traps you didn't fall into because God dismantled them. There are attacks that never reached you because God intercepted them. You didn't survive because you were lucky. You survived because God was working in places you couldn't see. While you were sleeping, He was guarding. While you were crying, He was strengthening. While you were questioning, He was arranging. While you were wondering what would happen next, He was already in your next, stabilizing what the enemy intended to shake. You are not as vulnerable as you think, and you are not as unprotected as you feel. The hand of God has been covering you long before you recognized it. Sometimes we think the only battles God fights are the ones we can identify, the ones with obvious enemies, clear threats, and visible wounds. But the greatest battles are often the ones in the unseen realm. The battles against spiritual forces that try to break your mind, distort your identity, discourage your spirit, and disconnect you from your purpose. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, meaning the real war is not happening in your circumstances. It's happening in the spiritual atmosphere around you. And God, in His wisdom, does not expose every battle to you. If He showed you everything the enemy attempted against you, you would collapse under the weight of fear. If He revealed every trap the darkness set for you, you would shake at the thought of what could have been. So He shields you not just from the attack, but also from the anxiety of knowing the attack existed. Think about the times you felt a sudden urge to pray, and you didn't know why. Think about the moments where you felt heavy for no reason, only to discover later that something dangerous, painful, or life-altering was happening around you. That heaviness was not depression. It was divine alertness. That tug in your spirit was not random. It was God prompting you to shift atmospheres. There are times God calls you into prayer, not because something terrible is happening, but because something terrible is trying to form. And your prayer becomes the wall the enemy cannot cross. Your worship becomes the fire the enemy cannot withstand. Your faith becomes the shield the enemy cannot break. Many times, God prevents battles before you ever notice the threat. You think you lost an opportunity, but God is saying, I blocked that because it would have destroyed you. You think a relationship ended unfairly, but God is saying, I pulled you out before your heart shattered. You think a door closed at the wrong time, but God is whispering, I shut it because what waited behind it was not aligned with your destiny. You must understand, God's no is often divine warfare. His delay is often divine defense. His redirection is often divine rescue. You are protected in ways you may never comprehend. When people walked away, God was removing wrong voices from influencing your path. When your plans failed, God was shielding you from consequences you weren't built to handle. When something didn't work out, God was orchestrating your survival. And when you felt forgotten, heaven was busy setting up what needed to align for your future. You may not see it in the moment, but the fingerprints of God are all over your story. Even the trauma you survived is proof of His intervention. If the enemy had his way, you would not have made it this far. The mental breakdown should have taken you out. The heartbreak should have left you bitter beyond repair. The rejection should have crushed your confidence. The loss should have stolen your hope. But somehow, through tears, through weakness, through confusion, through pain, you kept standing. Not because you were strong, but because God was strong for you. Not because you held everything together, but because He held you together when you were falling apart. There are angels assigned to you who have fought demons you never saw. There are moments where death looked at you and had to step back because God said, not this one, not today. There are seasons where the enemy planned destruction, but God whispered, I will not allow it. That's why the weapon formed, but it did not prosper. That's why the attack rose, but it did not prevail. That's why the plot was made, but it did not succeed. God has been defeating battles long before you recognize the war. Sometimes you wonder why you feel tired even when nothing seems wrong. It's because your spirit has been in warfare even when your mind didn't understand it. But the good news is this: even when your spirit is weary, God is still working. Even when your confidence trembles, God is still fighting. Even when your courage fades, God is still defending. He does not wait for you to be strong before He steps in. He steps in because you are weak. Your weakness does not repel Him, it attracts Him. Your vulnerability does not push Him away, it pulls Him closer. God fights differently than humans fight. Humans fight with anger, effort, and exhaustion. God fights with sovereignty, strategy, and authority. One word from Him dismantles entire spiritual assaults. One move from Him overturns what was meant to overturn you. One touch from Him changes what years of pain tried to solidify. You don't need to understand how He does it. You just need to trust that He is doing it. And when you look back years from now, you will realize that the things that terrified you never touched you. The things that threatened you never overtook you. The things that tried to break you only built you. Then you will look up to heaven and say, God, if you hadn't been fighting for me, I wouldn't be here. But you are here. Not because the journey was easy, but because God was active in the shadows. You are not walking through life unprotected. You are not stepping into battles unaccompanied. Every day you live, God is working behind the scenes, fighting, shielding, intercepting, guiding, blocking, lifting, and securing your destiny. The danger you never saw proves the deliverance you never noticed. And the battles you're unaware of are the victories God already won. You are not alone. God is fighting your hidden battles. There comes a point in every believer's life when the silence gets loud. The room feels full, yet you feel empty. You can be surrounded by people, laughter, conversations, and still feel like nobody truly sees you. You can pour out love, time, and energy into others and still feel unseen, unheard, and unnoticed. Loneliness doesn't always happen in isolation. Sometimes loneliness follows you into crowded places. It sits next to you in church, walks with you at work, rides with you in the car, and lays beside you in the bed at night. It whispers to you, you're by yourself. Nobody understands you. Nobody cares. Nobody knows what you're really going through. But here is the powerful truth that exposes the lie of loneliness. Your loneliness is a lie. God's presence surrounds you even when people don't. Loneliness is one of the enemy's favorite weapons because if he can convince you that you are alone, he can convince you that you are unprotected, unwanted, and unsupported. He can make you think no one is fighting for you. No one is praying for you. No one is thinking about you. He can distort your reality until you believe that your struggles are unnoticed and your pain doesn't matter. But loneliness is a deception. It is a fog the enemy uses to blind you from the presence that has never left you. The enemy wants you to focus on who walked away, who didn't show up, who didn't check in, who didn't love you correctly. But God wants you to focus on who stayed. And the one who stayed is greater than all the ones who left. You are not alone because God is Emmanuel, God with us, not God near us, not God around us, but God with us, with you in the storm, with you in the dark, with you in the confusion, with you in the heartbreak, with you in the moments when you cannot hold yourself together. There has never been a second in your life where God stepped away from you. Others may step back, but God steps closer. Others may forget you, but God remembers you. Others may not understand you, but God knows you fully, your thoughts, your fears, your weaknesses, your flaws, your strengths, your destiny. Even when you feel hidden from the world, you are seen by God. Sometimes the reason you feel alone is because God has separated you from certain voices so you could hear his voice more clearly. He isolates you not to punish you, but to shape you. He removes the crowd not to hurt you, but to develop you. There are seasons where God pulls you into quietness, not because he has abandoned you, but because he wants to reveal something to you that cannot be heard in noise. Some of the greatest revelations you will ever receive happen when you feel the most alone. Some of the deepest strengthening moments in your life occur when the room is silent and your heart is trembling. It is in that place where God whispers, "You're not alone. I'm here." Loneliness often shows up right before God reveals a new chapter. It is the womb of transformation. Think about every major turning point in Scripture. Moses alone in the wilderness, Joseph alone in the pit, in the prison, Elijah alone under the juniper tree, Jacob alone wrestling with God, Jesus alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. Each of these moments looked like abandonment, but they were actually divine appointments. God does his deepest work in the quiet of your loneliness, molding you, stretching you, and preparing you for what's ahead. Your loneliness is a holy space, not a hopeless one. It is a space where God is nearer than your breath, but the enemy wants you to interpret your isolation as rejection. He wants you to think that your quiet season is proof that you're forgotten. So he whispers lies into the cracks of your heart. No one cares about you. No one wants you. You're fighting this alone, yet God stands there, unshaken, unmoved, unchanging, saying, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." It's not a suggestion, not a hopeful phrase, not a poetic promise. It is a covenant. When people walk out, God stays. When people misunderstand you, God understands perfectly. When people don't show up, God arrives before you call. His presence is the guarantee that you are never truly alone. If you pause long enough, you will notice that even in your loneliest moments, something held you together. Something kept you from collapsing. Something sustained you when you thought you had no strength left. That something wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was God's presence wrapping around your spirit like a blanket in the cold night. You may not have seen him with your eyes, but you felt him in the way peace came out of nowhere. You felt him in the way clarity started to rise after confusion. You felt him in the way your heart softened when bitterness tried to harden it. You felt him in the way you woke up to fight another day, even though you thought you were done. God's presence is not always loud, but it is always life-giving. You must also understand that people's absence is not always abandonment. It is often alignment. God removes certain people because their season in your life has expired. Their presence would hinder your growth. Their influence would derail your purpose. Their words would distort your direction. God loves you too much to let the wrong people stay. His protection sometimes looks like separation. He closes doors because he doesn't want you to walk into something that will bruise your spirit. He ends connections because he doesn't want you to tie your identity to someone who doesn't value you. You think you lost people, but God is saying, "I rescued you by removing them." And while others may not walk with you, God walks with you in ways they never could. People can walk with you physically, but only God can walk with you spiritually. People can offer comfort, but only God can offer healing. People can give advice, but only God can give direction. People can support your emotions, but only God can anchor your soul. Being surrounded by people does not guarantee peace, but being surrounded by God guarantees stability. There are encounters in your life that prove his presence even when you didn't recognize it at the time. That time you cried until you fell asleep, but woke up calm, that was God. That moment you almost made a destructive decision, but something stopped you, that was God. That season where you thought you were losing your mind, Yet you somehow regained strength. That was God. The reason you're still standing today is because His presence never left your side. You are never walking through valleys by yourself. God walks them with you, lights them with His peace, and transforms them with His purpose. When you feel abandoned, God is drawing closer. When you feel lonely, God is whispering your name. When you feel misunderstood, God is saying, I know you. I see you. I've got you. His presence is not based on your emotions. It is based on His promise. Even when you don't feel Him, He is there. Even when you don't hear Him, He is working. Even when you don't sense Him, He is holding you up. Your loneliness is a lie. You are surrounded by a presence that cannot be shaken, cannot be blocked, cannot be diminished. You are covered by a God who sits high but walks close. A God who fills the spaces others leave empty. A God who stands beside you when everyone else steps away. A God who will never let you face a battle, a burden, or a moment of life alone. You may feel alone, but you are not forsaken. You may feel unseen, but you are deeply loved. You may feel isolated, but you are eternally surrounded by the God who holds your past, your present, and your future in His hands. You are not alone. God is with you in every breath, every step, every tear, every night, every battle, and every moment of your life. Life has a way of bringing us into moments that feel confusing, painful, and unfair. Moments where you look around and wonder, why did this happen? Why did this fall apart? Why did they leave? Why did this opportunity close? You replay conversations in your head, retrace decisions, and sometimes blame yourself for things that were never your fault. You feel like you've been pushed back, knocked down, delayed, or rejected. And it hurts. It hurts in places you don't talk about. It hurts in ways people don't see. But what you must understand is that what looks like a setback is often divine protection in disguise. God does not just guide you into blessings. He shields you from destruction. And sometimes His greatest protection feels like disappointment. There are doors you prayed for that God refused to open because behind them was something that would have drained you, damaged you, or derailed your destiny. You were asking God for access, but God was planning your safety. He knew the motives you couldn't see. He knew the betrayals you didn't expect. He knew the hidden traps that were waiting for you if you had walked through that door. So He closed it, not because you weren't ready, but because the place you wanted wasn't right. When God closes a door, it doesn't mean He is punishing you. It means He is preserving you. It means He saw something ahead that you didn't see. It means His love stepped in before your heartbreak became fatal. We often judge our situation based on what is visible, but God makes decisions based on what is invisible. You only see the surface, but God sees the depth. You see the moment, but God sees the lifelong outcome. You see what you want, but God sees what you need. And when He blocks something, He is not being cruel. He is being protective. Sometimes the relationship that didn't work out wasn't a failure. It was a rescue. The job you didn't get wasn't rejection, it was redirection. The connection that fell apart wasn't loss, it was liberation. God will allow temporary pain to save you from permanent damage. He will let you cry now so you don't bleed later. He will let something fall apart because He knows if it stayed together, it would eventually collapse on top of you. And though you may question Him in the moment, you will thank Him in the future. There is nothing God takes away without protecting you from something greater. There is nothing He removes without replacing it with something aligned with your purpose. The enemy wants you to misinterpret your setback. He wants you to see it as evidence that God forgot you, overlooked you, or abandoned you. He wants to magnify the disappointment until you lose sight of the protection. He wants you to obsess over what didn't happen so much that you miss what God is doing behind the scenes. But if you could see the spiritual realm, you would realize that the very setback that frustrated you was the shield that saved you. God stood between you and what was meant to destroy you, and you thought it was a setback when it was actually a divine interception. Think about the times in your life when something unexpectedly ended and you were devastated. But months or even years later, you realized that if you had stayed in that situation, your peace would have been shattered, your growth would have been stunted, your purpose would have been hijacked, and your identity would have been damaged. What looked like abandonment was protection. What looked like loss was God's way of freeing you. What looked like rejection was actually God's redirection. God will never let you settle in a place beneath your calling. He will disrupt what you would have tolerated. He will shake what you were starting to depend on. He will remove what you were clinging to so that you can reach what He prepared for you. Sometimes the setback is not the enemy, it's God removing you from something that wasn't His will. You may think you're being pushed backward, but God is actually positioning you. You may think you're losing something valuable, but God is preventing you from losing something vital. There are people whose absence is a blessing, not a loss. There are opportunities you think you missed, but what you actually missed was a crisis. There are situations you wanted to enter, but God knew entering them would scar you. God protects His children not by giving them everything they want, but by blocking what they do not need. When God says no, He is not being restrictive, He is being protective. When God removes someone, He is not weakening you. He is strengthening your future. Sometimes the pain of a setback is simply the pain of separation. God is separating you from everything that cannot go where He is taking you. Not everyone can handle your future. Not every environment can sustain your growth. Not every relationship can carry your purpose. God loves you too much to let your destiny suffocate in a place that wasn't designed for you. So He separates you even when the separation feels like loss. And while you're crying over what you thought you needed, God is celebrating over what He saved you from. God will let you walk away from fake support so you can step into real alignment. He will strip away what is unstable so you can be rooted in what is unshakable. He will shake things that were never meant to be permanent so He can reveal what truly is. The setback is the pruning. The pruning is the preparation. And the preparation is the promise unfolding. If you're in a season where doors are closing, don't panic. If people are leaving, don't cling. If opportunities are disappearing, don't drown in fear. The God who protects you doesn't need your understanding. He needs your trust. You don't have to see the danger to appreciate the deliverance. You don't have to know what He saved you from to praise Him for the protection. Your job is not to figure out the why. Your job is to stand still and trust that your setback is divine strategy in motion. There will come a time when you will look back at this moment and realize it was a turning point. Not the point where your life fell apart, but the point where God redirected you into something greater. You will see that every closed door was a shield. Every no was guidance. Every delay was preparation. Every disappointment was divine insulation, and every setback was God lifting you above what was beneath you. God's protection is not always comfortable. It often looks like confusion, feels like loss, and sounds like silence. But it is protection nonetheless. And if God has to break your heart to save your life, He will. If He has to disappoint your expectations to fulfill your destiny, He will. If He has to shut down your plans to secure your future, He will. You may cry now, but you will rejoice later. What looks like a setback is not a setback. It is God's hand, God's shield, God's rescue mission, God's redirection, and God's love in disguise. Nothing He does is random. Nothing He allows is accidental. Nothing He removes is unnecessary. Everything God permits is part of a larger plan to protect your soul, preserve your purpose, and position you for a future you cannot yet see. So don't fear the setback. Respect it, honor it, trust it, because what looks like a setback is God saying, I'm guarding you, I'm preserving you, I'm fighting for you, and I'm leading you into something far greater than you ever imagined. There comes a moment in every believer's journey where strength seems to evaporate. You wake up one day and realize that what used to be easy now feels heavy. What used to be manageable now feels overwhelming. What you used to carry with a smile now presses on your chest like a weight you can no longer lift. You try to encourage yourself, but the words don't land the way they used to. You try to push through, but your energy isn't what it once was. You try to pray, but even prayer feels like a whisper you can barely produce. Strength leaks out of you slowly, quietly, silently, until one day you find yourself saying, Lord, I can't do this anymore. And that's when God steps in, because when your strength runs out, God's strength steps in. God never asked you to be supernatural. He never demanded that you be invincible. He never expected you to carry every burden, solve every problem, or fight every battle by yourself. You were never designed to be your own source. You were created with limitations so that you could know the unlimited power of God. Your exhaustion is not proof of failure. It is proof of your humanity. And God does not condemn your weakness. He meets you in it. Because weakness is not the absence of God's presence. It is the invitation for His presence to manifest. Some of the greatest moves of God happen when you reach the end of yourself. God does His best work when your hands are empty, your mind is tired, and your heart is overwhelmed. He strengthens you not at your highest, but in your lowest. Not when you feel powerful, but when you feel powerless. Not when your confidence is high, but when your courage is low. Sometimes your breakdown is the birthplace of your breakthrough. Sometimes your awareness is the signal that God is about to pour fresh power into your spirit. You must understand that God is not waiting for you to be strong to help you. He is waiting for you to surrender. Your strength was never supposed to be the foundation of your life. Your strength was never meant to sustain you. It is His strength that carries you through seasons where you can't carry yourself. When you come to the end of your ability, you discover the beginning of His. When you hit your limit, you encounter His limitlessness. When you stop depending on what you can do, you finally see what only He can do. There were moments in your life when you thought you were going to collapse under pressure, times when the weight of responsibility, expectations, pain and confusion was too much. Times when you said to yourself, I can't take another step. I can't cry another tear. I can't fight another battle. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still standing, still surviving, still pushing forward. Not because you were strong, but because I'd strengthened you when you didn't even realize it. You made it through nights that were darker than your words could describe. You came through battles that drained your soul. You endured storms that should have destroyed you. But every time your strength reached zero, God filled you with His strength. There is a supernatural exchange that happens when you run out of strength. God does not watch you fall apart. He steps into the cracks of your weakness. His power flows into the places where your power fails. His peace enters the spaces where your anxiety used to live. His grace covers the gaps your effort couldn't reach. When you can't hold it together, He holds you together. When your arms get tired from fighting, He lifts them for you. When your heart gets weary from believing, He breathes hope back into you. God's strength is not like human strength. Human strength fades, fluctuates, and fails. God's strength is steady, unshakable, and eternal. Human strength depends on mood, environment, and circumstances. God's strength flows regardless of the storm, regardless of the pressure, regardless of what the enemy is doing. Human strength relies on understanding. God's strength works even when you don't understand anything at all. There are seasons where God will intentionally let your strength run out, not to punish you, but to reposition you. Because as long as you think you can do everything alone, you will. As long as you think your strength is enough, you won't seek His. As long as you think your plan will sustain you, you won't trust His plan. Sometimes God lets your strength drain so you stop depending on everything except Him. He lets your plans fall apart so you stop leaning on your own wisdom. He lets your confidence shake so you root your identity in Him instead of in your accomplishments. His goal is not to weaken you. His goal is to strengthen you the right way, with strength that comes from Him and not from you. Every battle you've survived so far was not won by your power. It was God strengthening you when you were too tired to fight. It was God protecting you when your guard was down. It was God sustaining you when your energy was gone. It was God pushing you when you felt stuck. It was God comforting you when you felt broken. It was God whispering peace when your mind was loud with worry. The truth is, if you had to rely solely on your own strength, you would have lost long ago. But God's strength has been your anchor, your refuge, and your stability. There are moments when strength doesn't come in the form of energy. It comes in the form of endurance. You may not feel powerful, but you feel the grace to keep going. You may not feel strong, but you feel the push to try again. You may not feel victorious, but you feel the urge not to quit. That is God's strength inside you. His strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes His strength is not a wind, it's a breath. Not a shout, it's a nudge. Not a leap, it's a step. But every bit of it is divine. When your heart is heavy, God becomes your lifter. When your mind is overwhelmed, God becomes your clarity. When your emotions are unstable, God becomes your anchor. When you don't have answers, God becomes your wisdom. When you don't have courage, God becomes your bravery. When you don't have the will to keep going, God becomes the reason you keep going. His strength is not something you have to earn. It is something he gives freely to those who lean on him. Sometimes God's strength shows up through people who encourage you when you're weak. Sometimes it shows up through a verse that feels like it was written directly for you. Sometimes it shows up through a moment of peace you can't explain. Sometimes it shows up through a sudden burst of clarity. Sometimes it shows up when you wake up one morning and realize you feel lighter for the first time in months. His strength is always present. You just have to stop trying to be your own savior long enough to receive it. When you finally admit to God, I can't do this without you, heaven responds with power. When you reach your limit, God says, now let me carry you. When you break, God says, I will rebuild you. When you run out, God says, I will refill you. Your weakness is not a flaw, it is the doorway through which God pours his power. You do not have to be strong all the time. You do not have to pretend you're okay when you're not. You do not have to fake strength to impress people who don't know your battles. You are allowed to be weak because you are connected to a God who is never weak. So when you feel like you can't go on, remember this. God is not asking you to be strong. He is asking you to trust his strength. He is the God who lifts the weary, strengthens the broken, restores the tired, and revives the hopeless. When your strength runs out, it is not the end. It is the beginning of divine empowerment. You are not collapsing. You are transitioning. You are not defeated. You are being carried. You are not fallen apart. You are falling into the arms of a God whose strength never fails. When your strength runs out, God's strength steps in, and his strength is more than enough. When God ordains a protection over your life, it is not always loud, it is not always visible, and it is not always understood by the people around you. Sometimes the greatest battles God fights for you are the ones even you don't recognize until much later. These silent battles, these invisible rescue missions, these unseen interventions of grace often happen when you are too exhausted to pray, too overwhelmed to think clearly, too burdened to defend yourself. And yet, God steps in anyway. He fights in the shadows. He works behind the curtain. He blocks what you never even realized was coming for you. And because his ways are higher, his strategies are wiser, and his love is relentless, he doesn't need the spotlight to save you. He doesn't need applause to protect you. He simply moves on your behalf in ways that transcend human understanding. There are seasons where God's greatest work in your life is done in silence. You wake up one morning feeling lighter and you don't even know why. You find yourself escaping a situation that should have destroyed you, and you can't explain how. You walk away from an accident, a betrayal, a financial setback, a spiritual attack, unscathed in ways that don't make logical sense. And if the truth were revealed, you would see that while you were sleeping, God was working. While you were worrying, God was intervening. While you were crying, God was standing guard like a mighty warrior, keeping back things that were meant to derail your destiny. You didn't see the trap, he dismantled. You didn't see the attack, he redirected. You didn't see the darkness he dismantled on your behalf, but heaven saw it, hell felt it, and your destiny survived because of it. God does not always announce what he is fighting for you because some battles would terrify you if you saw them. Some enemies look small on the outside but are giants in the spirit. Some situations you think you can handle would have crushed you in a moment. Some people you trusted had intentions you couldn't discern. And God, in his mercy, doesn't expose you to everything that was coming for you. He just handles it. He shields you from what your maturity isn't ready for. He protects you from what your heart isn't prepared to confront. He fights off the wolves that you mistake for sheep. He blocks the arrows shot from distances you cannot see. He shuts the mouths of lions that gather in the dark corners of your journey. Sometimes God will let you feel the weight of a battle just enough for you to grow, yet not enough to destroy you. You may feel the pressure, but not the collapse. You may feel the heat, but not the burn. You may feel the shaking, but not the breaking. That is the proof that God is not allowing the full force of the attack to touch you. You are only experiencing fragments, vibrations, echoes of what was meant to wreck you. And if the full story were revealed, you would fall on your face in worship, not because you are weak, but because you are overwhelmed by the magnitude of his protection. What you think is just a hard day is sometimes the tail end of a massive war that heaven has already won for you before the sun even rose. There are hidden battles God fights for you in your mind. The negative thoughts that should have overpowered you, the depression that tried to suffocate you, the anxiety that tried to drown you, the suicidal whisper that tried to pull you under. And yet, you're still here. Not because you fought perfectly, not because you're so strong, but because God fortified your mind when you didn't even realize it. He placed a hedge of peace around your thoughts when you were too exhausted to think clearly. He blocked the enemy's attempt to hijack your emotions. Yes, you felt overwhelmed. Yes, you cried. Yes, you questioned, doubted, feared. But you never lost your mind. You never lost your soul. You never lost yourself. That's not coincidence. That's evidence. God also fights hidden spiritual battles for you, battles you don't even discern. When the enemy plants traps in relationships, God exposes them. When people speak your name with ill intentions, God silences them. When unseen forces attempt to pull you into cycles of defeat, God breaks them. When generational patterns try to bind you, God intervenes and says, "Not this one, not this time, not this child." You are standing on the other side of deliverances you don't even remember receiving. You are benefiting from breakthroughs you didn't even know you needed. You are walking in victories that were won for you in realms you cannot see. Sometimes God will remove a person from your life and you don't understand why until later. Sometimes God will close a door you were eager to walk through only for you to discover it was a trap. Sometimes God will delay a blessing because the timing wasn't safe. Sometimes God will shift your path because danger was waiting on the route you preferred. When you look back, you realize the breakup was protection. The rejection was redirection. The disappointment was deliverance. The closed door was God's way of shielding you from an outcome that would have destroyed you. And here's the beauty. God is not asking you to fight these hidden battles. He's asking you to trust him in them. He is calling you to a deeper confidence, a deeper rest, a deeper faith that says, even when I cannot see him, he is working. Even when I cannot trace him, I can trust him. Because your protection is not based on your awareness. Your safety is not dependent on your perception. Your victory is not limited by what your natural eyes can observe. God is not bound by your understanding. He is bound by his promise. So walk with your head high, not because life is perfect, but because heaven is active. Walk with peace in your spirit, not because the battle is easy, but because the victory is already secured. Walk with confidence, not because you know the details, but because you know the God who sees what you cannot see. You are not alone. You are not unprotected. You are not vulnerable. You are not uncovered. There are angels assigned to your life. There is favor surrounding you. There is a hedge around your destiny. And the God who neither sleeps nor slumbers is fighting your hidden battles with perfect precision, unstoppable power, and unmatched love. You may not see it, you may not feel it, you may not understand it, but God is fighting for you quietly, constantly, and completely. And because of that, you will survive things you never even knew tried to kill you. You will overcome battles you never even realized were waged against you. You will walk into blessings you never even saw coming, not by your strength, but by his grace, not by your strategy, but by his sovereignty, not by your power, but by his promise. God is fighting your hidden battles, and you will win, not because you're perfect, but because he is faithful. As we bring this message to a close, I want you to feel the weight of one unshakable truth settling deep into your spirit. You are not alone, and you have never been alone, not for 1 second, not for one step, not for one breath. Even in the moments when life pressed you to your knees, even in the nights when your pillow was soaked in tears, even in the seasons where silence seemed to surround you and heaven felt distant, God was right there, fighting for you. If you could see the battles he blocked, the traps he dismantled, the storms he rerouted, the enemies he silenced, the dangers he erased from your path, You would understand why the enemy hates your future so much. You would understand why you're still standing. You would understand why, despite all you've been through, you didn't break, you didn't fold, and you didn't lose your mind, because there was a God standing guard over your destiny, making sure every weapon formed against you would fail. You may feel tired, but you're protected. You may feel pressed, but you're preserved. You may feel shaken, but you are not forsaken. You may feel the battle, but you are not fighting alone. This fight is not yours. It belongs to the Lord. And when God fights, He doesn't fight to survive. He fights to win. He fights to restore. He fights to elevate. He fights to usher you into the fullness of what He promised you before you even took your first breath. So, as you walk out of this message, walk with a renewed confidence, walk with a lifted head, walk with a heart anchored in hope. Because the same God who protected you from the battles you couldn't see is the same God who will empower you for the victories you will see. Your future is secure. Your purpose is guarded. Your destiny is unstoppable. Stand firm, stay faithful, keep walking, because the God who fought your hidden battles is about to reveal the victory openly. And when He does, every tear, every trial, every lonely night will make sense. You are not alone. You are surrounded, you are covered, and God, your mighty warrior, is fighting for you.